All right, I think we should go ahead and get started. So what we have on the agenda for tonight is to start talking about Excel, which is one of my all-time favorite topics. So we're going to have lots of fun talking about Excel. So what we are going to be doing is in your booklet, if you turn to page number Excel 2 and Excel 3, basically we're going to be creating two different things. We're going to create a worksheet and we're going to create a chart. So those are the two things that we're going to be doing today. So that's kind of the plan for what we have on the agenda. Before we get started on Excel, one of the things that I always like to talk about is, because we're going to be talking about Access in a couple of weeks, or not a couple of weeks, a couple of days. And I always like to talk a little bit about what you can do with Excel versus what you can do with Access. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make in using Excel is that they try to use Excel to manage large amounts of data. And one of the problems with that is that Excel was not designed to do data. Excel was designed to do calculations. So it was designed to, be a gigantic calculator. That's what Excel was designed to do. And so one of the things that you have to ask yourself when you're trying to figure out, should I be using Access or should I be using Excel? The question you want to ask is, what am I primarily doing? Am I primarily calculating stuff? Am I primarily adding things together and multiplying them or dividing them or running calculations on information? If yes, Excel is the right choice. If no, and you're primarily just managing data, then yeah, you can do it in Excel. And if you have a relatively small amount of data, that might be the best choice. But generally, it's going to be better to use an actual database program. And the analogy I always like to give on this is, if I need to hammer in a nail and all I have at my disposal is a screwdriver, the back end of a screwdriver will work okay as a hammer. But if I have a hammer, I should use the hammer. You always want to use the right tool for the right job. And the Excel, the job for Excel is calculating stuff. And the right job for a database program is managing data. That doesn't mean you can't do data in Excel. You can. It's just that's not what it was designed for. And similarly, it doesn't mean you can't do calculations in Access. You can. It's just that's not what it was designed for. So if you are primarily calculating things, then Excel is the right choice. And if you're primarily dealing with data, then Access is going to be the right choice. And we're going to talk more about this as we move along, but I just wanted to get that, in your head as we start doing it. So the first thing that I wanted to point out to you is on page number 5 of the Excel document. It has the sketch of the worksheet and chart. And what we're basically going to be doing is taking that chart or that sketch and making it into real information. I'm doing it in Excel. So the first thing that we want to do in Excel is obviously we want to launch Excel. So to launch Excel, it's going to be on your start menu, and then you're going to want to go up to programs and then go into Microsoft Office and then into Excel. So E, there it is, Excel. And when we launch Excel, just like with Microsoft Word, the default situation is that it brings up the backstage. which again, I hate, but I understand why. And just like with Word, it opens up a bunch of templates, of which almost none of them are what you want to do. And instead, you want to use the blank workbook. So we're going to click onto the workbook. So Excel is broken up into what are known as worksheets and a workbook. So a workbook is a collection of worksheets, and a worksheet is the individual items that make up the workbook. So the file is called a workbook. In Google Docs, they call it a spreadsheet. And in fact, when Excel first came out, the only thing that Excel could do was to have one worksheet. And then a few years after Excel came out, they added the ability to have multiple worksheets within one file. And that's when they decided to change the name from a worksheet to being a workbook. And then each individual worksheet is called a sheet. So in Excel, a worksheet is the individual data that we're putting, the individual page where we're putting in the data, the individual document is the better word, individual document that we're putting all of our data in. And then you can have multiple sheets. And if you look down at the bottom of it, you'll see that it currently says sheet 1. If I click onto this plus button, it'll create then sheet 2. And if I click on the plus button again, it'll say sheet 3. So I have now 3 worksheets in this one workbook. And that means that I could put in fake data in sheet 1, and then I could go into sheet 2, and that data isn't there because this is a different worksheet. And I could put in different data in this one, and I could go into sheet 3, and I could put even more data into sheet 3. That's how Excel is put together. So there are different worksheets within a workbook, and the default file name is going to be book 1, and the default name for sheets is sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. All right, so a worksheet is broken up then into what are known as cells. And a cell is defined by its column, which goes from A to the infinite letters of the alphabet. By default, all we see by default is up to like T or whatever, but it actually goes until you run out of memory, or there is an actual ultimate ending in terms of the number of cells that you can have. I mean, the number of columns you can have. It's ridiculously large in Excel 2013, and it got even larger in 2016, and it got even larger in 2019. And the same thing then goes with the rows. So rows are done as the number, and columns are done by the letter. And we call each of these boxy thingies the cell. And the boxy thingy is where all of the information is going to go. It's where the actual information goes. And one of the biggest differences between Excel and Word is that in Word, we essentially have one gigantic cell. In Excel, we have a bajillion little cells. So for example, if I tell Excel that I want to center something, center does not mean center across the entire page. Center means center across the cell that I happen to be in. And I have to then change the width of the cell to match whatever size I want it to be in order sometimes to tell that it's been centered. And we're going to point this out as we're going along. So right at the moment, I am currently in cell D9. And the reason I know that I'm in D9 is that D is highlight in a different way, and 9 is highlight in that same way. I can also tell that I'm in there because of the name box. So this little drop-down menu thingy is called the name box, and in the name box, by default, the name box will tell you what cell you're currently in. So if I click on here, I'm now in B5. If I use my up, down, left, right arrow keys, I can move, and now I'm in A2. If I go up to A1, I'm now in A1. If I want to select stuff in Excel, you'll notice that when I move my mouse changes how it appears. When it's a pointer like this, it means I'm not in anything in Excel. When I am in Excel, it will become a white cross. When it's a white cross, that means I can select stuff. So at this point now, I have selected the range A1 to F15. And if I select from, say, C4, and I click and hold down my mouse button, I'm now selecting from C4 to F15. Another way that I can select stuff is to use my keyboard shortcuts. And to do the keyboard shortcut, I hold down the Shift key while I move my up, down, left, right arrow keys, and that will allow me to select a range as well. So if I want to select from B3 to D7, I could use my keyboard and get to B3, and then I can hold down my Shift key while I maneuver to D7. And that will allow me to move around. You may have noticed that I've just now skipped down all the way to the end. So in Excel, there are 1.0485 million rows, it looks like, that I could put in. The keyboard shortcut for scrolling all the way down to the very end is you hold down the Control key and then you go arrow down, or on a Mac, it is Command and then arrow down. If I want to go all the way to the right, anyone have a guess as to how I go all the way to the right? Yeah, Control and then right arrow, and I'll jump all the way to XFD. What is XFD? Well, it goes A, B, C, D, F to Z, and then it goes, after that, it goes to AA, A, B, A, C, A, D, and then after that, it goes to B, and then C, and so on and so forth, and eventually you'll get to XFD, which is the most it could be, and I've forgotten exactly how much that is, but I want to say it's like 64,000. It's something ridiculously large. If you're using all of those cells, then that tells me you need to stop using Excel to do your data, and you need to convert that into an Access database. That's what that is telling me. Anytime I see anybody using a spreadsheet that is larger than about 100 or so items, that's the point at which it stops being good to do it in Excel, and you really, really, really want to move it into Access. I sometimes will, do consulting work or whatever, and they'll say, I've got this really big database, this really big spreadsheet that I'm working on, and I need some help in analyzing the information in the spreadsheet. And I show up, and I look at it and I'm like, why are you doing this in Excel? You should be doing this in Access. And their normal response is, what the heck is Access? And then I say, well, the reason you're having problems is because you're trying to use the back end of a screwdriver to hammer in your nail.
convert the Excel data into Access?
Absolutely, you can convert Excel data into Access. The way that you convert Excel data into Access is that you open up Access and you go under, I forget exactly where it is, but there's a import, I think it's import. It's like import and then from, and then in import from, you say import from an Excel spreadsheet, and you'll import in from the Excel spreadsheet. We'll talk about that when we actually go into Access. All right, what else did I want to tell you before we really get started? I think that's the main thing I wanted to tell you before we really get started. So I'm going to actually quit out of this and open up a new spreadsheet because I want it to be clean, so it's like what yours is like. So we start off, and I'm in A1, and we are on page number 7 of our document, and so I mean of our book. And so we are going to, the first thing we're going to do is in A1, we are, and I'll blow up my screen so you can see a little bit easier. We are going to go in, and in A1, we're going to say personal budget worksheet. So this is, we're going to be creating a personal budget worksheet in today's class. So that's what this is going to be. So that's going to be in A1. One of the things to know about Excel is that up here, this thingy up here is the formula bar. The formula bar is where you're actually entering in data. The formula bar is where you're actually typing in the stuff and so on. So even though it may look like you're typing it in over here, and that's usually where people look when they are typing stuff in, the location where you're actually truly putting stuff in is next to the FX button. That's where things are really, truly going. All right. The next thing is that in A2, we wanted to say monthly estimates. And then in A3, we wanted to say income. One of the things to know about Excel is that just like with Access, just like with Word, any autocorrect thingies that you've set up should work. So if I say, what was it, MB? Yep, if you enter it in Word, it's going to be in Excel, and if you do it in Excel, it's going to be in Access, and if you do it in Access, it's going to be in PowerPoint, and if you do it in PowerPoint, it's going to be in all of them, because they're all, it's not program specific, it's suite specific. So it goes for the entire suite. Now it only works again on that particular installation of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Access. If I do it on my laptop, it's not going to show up on my laptop unless I've also changed my my settings to have that in it. But all right, so we just entered in income. The next thing that they want us to do is they want us to start putting in the January, February, and March. And the way the book is telling you to do it is terrible. Or rather, the way the book is telling you to do it at this point is really, really lame. And so I'm going to show you the all-time coolest thing about Excel. Now, I think I've mentioned this before. I've got a lot of things that I think are really, really cool. So you may hear me say that again. But really, this is really cool. My daughter hates it, by the way. She hates it, because I'll say, that's my favorite movie of all time. And then she'll say, Dad, you said that about that movie. And I'm like, I know, but it's also my favorite movie of all time. She can't have a favorite. Of course I can. So anyway, that's why, dads get to have that thing. Anyway, I am going to show you something really, really, really cool. So I want you to stop whatever it is that you're working on. If you're working on something, and just look up at the screen, because this is going to be totally, totally awesome. And I'm going to put it on a separate file so it's not messing up our stuff. So the first thing I want to show you about this is that let's say you need to write a particular thing over and over and over again. So let's say that you need to say, you know, Mark is the greatest, because, you know, he's totally the greatest. And then what I want to do is I want to say that like a whole bunch of times. So to say it a whole bunch of times, one of the things that you may be able to notice is that in the corner of this cell, the cell has kind of a box around it, but then right at the corner, it has a little black box. That little black box is called the fill handle. And the fill handle is the all-time coolest thing about Excel, or at least right at the moment, it's the coolest thing in Excel. And by the way, in Google Sheets, they call it the autofill handle. So the fill handle in Excel, the autofill handle in Google Sheets. And what it does is that you'll notice that when I move my mouse, it goes from being a plus to being a black plus. So you see it's a white plus, but once I put my mouse over the fill handle, it becomes a black plus. So what the fill handle lets me do is so if I just am on the white handle and I go like this, it's going to select. But if I go in on the black plus and I click and drag it down, it goes like that. And then if I say, well, that's not enough, so then I go across this way. And let me zoom out so I can actually see it all. And then I could say, yeah, but it really needs to be like this. And then it really needs to be like this. That is one of the cool things that you can do with the fill handle. So that's one cool thing you can do with the fill handle. Another really cool thing about the fill handle is that it will figure out sequences for you. Now, you usually have to teach it what the sequence is. So if I go in and I say 1, and I just go and scroll down, it just repeats 1 all the way down because I didn't tell it what I wanted to do with it other than the number 1. But if I go like this, let me delete, and I say 1, 2, 3, and now I select 1, 2, and 3, and I click and drag this down. Or let's say I do 3, 6, 9. Or, you know, 1, 15. That actually is probably enough to find it. Yep. So that's kind of cool. How did I do that? I typed in a number, so 5, and then another number so I can understand what the pattern is. So like 10. So I'm saying go by 5s. I then select 5 and 10, and I use the fill handle, and it will go by 5s. So that's kind of cool. But it also works with things like Monday, Wednesday. That's enough to get a sequence going. So I say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Or if I want every day of the week, Monday, Tuesday. Or if I wanted it to be Monday, Thursday. Let's see what that does. So Monday, Thursday, so every 4 days. Or what if I wanted to do January, March, so that's kind of neat.
It doesn't do
It does do that's what I was just about to say. So in addition to going in columns, I could go in rows. So if I say 1, 3, and I go by the row 1 instead of the column, I can go by by rows. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Add 2, add 2, add 2, add 2. So this is a column this is a column and this is a row. So if I go by column in this case, because I'm in row 1 and I'm changing it by column. If I go down again, it's just going to do 1, 1, 1, 1 because I haven't given a pattern going down this way. The one exception to that pattern is, I believe, days of the week it will do it. So if I say Monday, I'm pretty sure it'll do Tuesday. Yeah. So days of the week, it assumes you want to do it as a sequence. And I think months, it automatically wants it to do as a sequence. So if I say February, I believe the next thing it'll do is March. Yeah. Now, you'll notice that there's this little icon that appears at the end of this. That allows me to change what my autofill option is doing. But these are all the things that it can do. It can copy cells. It can fill a series. It can fill just the formatting. So if I had, bold and pink background and polka dotted border, and I just wanted to copy that, I could do fill formatting only. Fill without formatting. So if I wanted the first one to be pink with purple polka dots, but I only wanted the first to be pink with purple polka dots, and I want the rest of it to continue going on, but change the data, then it would be fill without formatting. Fill months does months, which is the same as fill series if it's a month. And flash fill is kind of one of those things that will it doesn't have a pattern for filling in the stuff. You have to have output that you want, and that it's one of those things that that is kind of beyond the scope of this class. And quite frankly, I hardly ever use it, even in real life. So anyway, questions so far on that? Yeah. Yeah, so if I wanted to have Monday and do Monday over and over and over again, then what I would do is I would do Monday over and over and over again, and then I would click on the button, and instead of saying fill series, I would say, no, copy cells. Well, it happens after you've done it. And it will go away if you click onto something else. So if I click onto here, actually, I guess it's not going away. It usually goes away. I'm not sure why it still is there, because it really shouldn't be. But anyway. So I think the fill handle is awesome. It's one of my all-time favorite things. So anyway, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it using the fill handle. If you want to do it the lame way, you're welcome to do it the lame way, but I'm going to do it the way cool way. And so I'm just going to say January, and then I am going to fill handle it across to how far it's supposed to go, December. So I'm going to go January to December, November, December. And then in N3, they wanted to say total. Yep. And then what they want us to do is, again, the really lame way of doing it. They want you to type it all over again for the expenses, which is ridiculous because you can copy and paste. So I'm going to copy and paste. So one of the ways to copy and paste is that I could select just the A to N, but I could also just click on to 3, which will allow me to copy the entire row. I can then do a Control-C to copy, or on a Mac do a Command-C to copy. And then they want this to go on row 8. So I go to row 8, and I do Control V or Command V to paste, and it now has that pasted. Now, they don't want it to say income, they want it to say expenses. So I'm going to change A8 to say expenses. But then I don't have to type in January all over again. I don't know why they want you to do that. That seems silly. Sorry? January should be there. All right, the next thing that they want us to do is on page 11. They want us to go on A4, and they want A4 to say wages. And then on A5, they want that to say dividends. And by the way, to go from a cell to the next cell, you can either click to the next cell, you can hit enter to go to the next cell, or you can use the up-down arrow key to go to the next cell. They all do the same thing. Let's see. Wages, dividends, and then they want the word total. And then they want, under expenses, they want rent and food and tuition and books and entertainment and car payment and gas and miscellaneous and total. And then on 19, A19, they want net. All right, so any questions so far? Any questions? Okay, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to enter in some data. Now, why they are lame, I really don't know, but what they want us to do is they want us to type in, the data manually, but we're going to use the fill handle because that's a way cooler way of doing it. So if I go in on January, in B4, I'm going to type in 1,000.29, 10029, and I'm going to press enter. And what they want us to do is they want us to copy this all the way across here. Now, if I do fill handle going across, it will fill handle it all the way across. And then dividends are coming in at 4,075 in January. And then also in September, it is 4,075. And the rest of the time, it's 0. So if I go to 0 and I fill handle that across, and I go, at this point, it's probably going to be faster just to do 0, 0, 0 for those 3. Then I get I get my data. And then for rent, they want $400.89. I would love to know where they're having rent for $400.89, but you know, all right. So the lame way of doing it, of course, would be to type it in here and here and here and here and here. The totally rad, super cool way of doing it is to use the fill handle. So I fill handle it all the way across and boom. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah, you don't have to fill handle it all the way across. You can stop it at any point. Now, the other way I could do it is I could just do a copy and paste as well. So if I do 300 for food and I do a copy, in Excel, you know that you are copying something because you get the marching ants. That's what this is called. This is called the marching ants because it kind of looks like ants that are marching. So when you have the marching ants, it means that you have copied something. And when I copy it, to paste it, I have to tell it where I want to paste it. So the where that I want to paste it is all the way across to here. So I have to select all the way across to there. And then I can do my paste and it will paste it across. Yep. So the first thing I did is I copied this. And then I selected from here to the end. So again, the way that I usually select is to use the keyboard shortcut. So to use the keyboard shortcut, I go to where I want to start my copying. So where I want to start my selecting, I hold down the shift key and I select the area that I want to be selected. And then once I have selected the area that I want to be selected, I can now paste. So I can do Control V to paste, and it will paste. Or I could do fill handle. Fill handle works too. All right, next thing is that in January, we pay $1,500 in tuition. And in August, we pay $1,500 in tuition. And then the rest of the time, we pay $0. Yes. No, it needs to have 0. Blank does not mean 0. Blank means blank. Now, numerically, it'll add up to 0, but we actually want it to register as a number, and so we want it to be 0. All right, next thing we want to do is books. So we're spending $500 on books. And again, we're not spending any on the months where it's not, so we're just going to do 500 and 500. So because I did 0, 0, 0 all the way across here, I could fill handle this going down, and it would fill handle and select going down. So I could select all of this, and then I can use my fill handle going down, and it will fill handle the same amount. Of course. Absolutely. There are always multiple ways of doing everything. So yes, you can do it any number of ways. All right, entertainment. So we want to spend $100 a month on entertainment. So I'm just going to copy 100 and paste it. And then car payment is $154.79. And I think this time I'll fill handle it across. And then gas is not the same every month. So this is one that is a little bit tricky. So gas is $100 in January and February and March and April, but not May. In May, it's 150. Oops, that's not May. It's 150. And in July, it's 100 and June, it's 150, and July, it's 150. And then in August, it goes back to being 100. And then let's see here. Miscellaneous is going to be $100 every month. So we'll do 100. Actually, we did 100 in entertainment, right? So I'll just select all of entertainment, and then I can paste it in here, and then I don't have to type it at all. That's better. All right, so now we've entered in our data, and the next thing that we want to do is we want to use Excel for what Excel was designed for. That is to do calculations. So in Excel, and for that matter in Google Sheets, the way that you calculate stuff is by putting in a formula. And the way that you tell Excel that you are going to do a formula is by using the symbol equals. So you put in an equal sign, and then you put in whatever the formula is that you want to use. So what I want to do is I want to use the sum function. And there are a couple of ways that I can use the sum function. One way to use the sum function is that if I knew that it was the sum function, I would just type it in. So if I want to just type it in, I would go to where I want my sum to go, which in this case is in B6. And I could type in equals SUM, open parentheses, and then the range of numbers that I want to sum up. And in this case, the range of numbers that I want to sum up are B4 and B5. So I could do one of several things. So actually, I don't want you to type anything right at the moment. I just want you to look up because I want to show you there are like 5 different ways or 3 different ways at least that you could do this. One way that I could do this is I could do equal sum, open parentheses, and then select the range. And when I select the range, you'll notice that it creates a colon rather in between the 2 cell numbers. That indicates a range. So in real life, when you're doing a range, if you're saying from A to Z, you do A-Z. In Excel, the way we do it is with a colon. B4 colon B5 means start at B4 and go all the way down to B5. Now, all the way down to B5 is right next to it, but go all the way down to B5, and everything that is in between B4 and B5 is what I want to do whatever this function is. In this case, sum it. I want to sum up those numbers. That's one way to do it. And if I press enter, it pops up and says $5,000 and $5,001.04. That's one way I could do it. Another way I could do it is I could say equals sum, open parentheses, and I want to sum up B4, comma, B5. So the reason that you might use the comma is if instead of doing an entire range, you just want to sum this cell and this other cell. So what if I want to, right at the moment I want to sum up B4 and B5 and we get 5,004, which is what we want. But what if instead what I wanted to do is B4, B5, and I don't know, C2 or C9. I want to add in C9 to it. This would be stupid. I don't know why I'd want to do this, but I can do this. And if I do this, I'm going to sum up then B4 plus B5 plus C9. And we get $5,004.93 or whatever. For a range, you put in a colon. For individual cells, you can put in the comma. So I told you there are several different ways that you could do this. Here's another completely different way of doing it without using the sum function at all. And that is that the sum function, of course, is one cell plus the other cell. So what I could do is I could say equals B4 and then plus and then B5. And that will also sum up your data. There is yet one more way that you could do it, and it's the way the book tells you to do it. And that is that Excel has a feature called the auto sum button. And it actually has several auto functions in it. This is actually called the function button. In the function button, if I click onto the function button, by default it will do sum, but I could tell it to do average or count or minimum or maximum or other functions. So if I go to the cell that I want to sum up and I click on the auto sum button, it will automatically figure out what it thinks I would want to sum up. It has been my experience that most of the time it figures out what I want. The key word there is most of the time. And it happens often enough that it doesn't do what I want it to do, that I really hate using the auto sum feature. Because if I'm not paying attention and I just click auto sum and I press enter without really analyzing what it was that I just told it to select, I might select stuff that I didn't mean to select, which might mess up my data, which might cause my boss to buy more stuff than we're supposed to, or not buy enough stuff that we're supposed to. And then I get yelled at because I didn't do my spreadsheet correctly. I mean, I don't hate the auto sum, but I caution you to be careful about using the auto sum. And that if you do use the auto sum, pay attention to the marching ants. And make sure that the marching ants are in fact marching over the data that you want to be auto summing. Because it may or may not be selecting what you actually thought you were selecting. Because computers are stupid and they do exactly what they're told. And so I might have accidentally put in a space that I didn't mean to. And so because there's a space, it doesn't select all of it because there's a space. And so it goes up until there's a space. Well, that might cause problems. In fact, it has caused problems. So I'm just saying, be careful about using auto sum. That said, when it works great because it's a huge time saver. You don't have to type equals SUM, open parentheses, select it, close parentheses. You can just press one button and it does it. And that's great, except for when it's not.
I know you're gonna come up, but I got the question. So if we go across now,
that is correct. That is exactly what we're going to do. So I've got my sum figured out, and whether I did it by doing equal sum open paren B4 colon B5, whether I did it by doing equal sum open paren and grabbed it and then close paren, or whether I did it using the auto sum button, or whether I go in and say equals B4 plus B5, however it is that I put it in there, I now have it. And so now what I want to do is apply the same rule to February and March and April and May and June. And as you just, guessed, the best way to do that is autofill. So if I go and I use the fill handle, it will autofill all of my data all the way across, which every month should be 1,029, except for January and September, which should be a little over 5,000. No, it doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase in the function. When you're typing, then it needs to be whatever, you want it to actually say. So capital letter J January is different than lowercase j January. But equals SUM in lowercase or equals S uppercase, lowercase u, uppercase m, or equals lowercase SUM, or equals lowercase su, uppercase m, they all mean the same thing. They will all be treated the same way. All right. What else? So we did that. We did that. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we want to do the same thing to the expenses. So to do the expenses, I'm going to do equals SUM, open paren, and I'm going to select, and I'm going to close my parentheses. Again, the reason that I prefer to do it that way is because I want to make sure that I'm actually selecting the stuff I'm supposed to be selecting. It should work to do the auto sum, but I prefer to be careful. Yeah. So again, I do equals SUM, open parentheses, so shift 9, and then I select my range, and then close parentheses. So in this case, B9 colon B16, and I get 3155, which I think is what they said. Good, that's the right number. And then I autofill it going all this way, and we get, you do have to close the parentheses. Yes. It's the same way that you do it on a with a mouse. Touchpad works the same way. Nope, that's the best way to do it. All right, next thing that they want us to do is they want us to sum up going down instead of going across. So to sum up going down, it's done the same way. So the way the book is telling you to do it is if I select these three things and I click on to auto sum, it will auto sum it. And the way that it's auto summing is going from B4 to M4. And this one is going from B5 to M5. And this is going from B6 to M6. That's fine. I selected, and then I auto-summed. Oh, the reason that it says 50 or 49 is because I've changed my zoom. So if I go in more, it's going to go in more. But as I change the width, it's going to change it. So don't worry if the numbers do not match exactly. Worry if they are off by a factor of like several, like if they're off by like 15, then it's wrong. If it's off by like 10, like a tenth, then it's correct. So it should be approximately $12,000, approximately $8,000, and approximately $20,000. If yours comes back as $20,004 with 56 cents, that's great. If it comes back as $20,005, that's great. If it comes back as $3,000, that's wrong. So it may or may not match exactly what is on my screen, but it should be within a couple of dollars. Actually, it should be within $1. But all right, let's see here. What else do they want us to do? They then want us to do the same thing for these guys. So the way that I did it up here is I used the auto sum. So this time I'm going to do it the way that I usually do it, which is one at a time. So I'll do equals sum open parentheses, and then I select the stuff that I want. I make sure it's the marching ants are surrounding the stuff that I want it to be selecting. And then I close my parentheses and I press enter. And it comes back as 4810, which is what it says that it should be. And then I can fill handle this down, and I get all of my numbers. So at the end, it should be approximately $18,000. If your total is not around $18,000, it means that probably you didn't put in $150 for gas during May, June, or July, or else you maybe didn't do the dividends at the right numbers, or I think there's another thing that tuition and books, those might not be, those tend to be the mistakes that people tend to make. I'm sorry? I know, that's what I'm saying. That's good. It will, actually. Yours does. It's just that I have made my screen smaller so that you can see it all. If I change my view, it would match yours. Yes. I know, isn't it? Isn't this cool? Like I said, fill handle is awesome, and the auto summing is awesome. Well, not auto summing, but doing the automatic correcting of stuff. So one of the things that's important about this is that if we were to go in and change these numbers, all of the total numbers would automatically change. So don't do this that I'm about to do, but just watch my screen. And if I go into December and all of a sudden, they finally realized that that we were getting a spectacularly great rental rate, and they finally bump it up to like 3,500, like it should be, or 2,000 or whatever it should be. Then it automatically updates total to 7,900 and the total to 21,000. And if I revert it back to 400, then it goes back down to 18,000. So it automatically updates based on what the data are. And again, this is where entering data is useful in Excel because we are doing calculations. If all we were doing is keeping track of items, like, I don't know, enrollments or something like that, then it might be better to do it in Access. But because I'm actually doing calculations, this is why doing it in Excel is the right choice for this. Yes. I'm sorry? Oh yeah, we'll have to save this. Right in the moment, this is called book 2, but we don't want to call it book 2. There's only like one more thing that I want to do on this before I save it. So the next thing that, that we want to do is we want to, excuse me, we want to figure out our net. So the net is our income minus our expenses. So in order to figure out what our net is, what we need to do is we need to go to where we want the calculation to go. And then we need to tell Excel that we want to do a calculation. So what do I do to tell it that I want to do a calculation? Equal sign. So I do equals. And then I need to say that I want it to be equal to January's total. So what is January's total? B6. So I could either type in B6 or I could click on the B6. Whatever you might want to do, it's fine. And then I want to subtract the total. So to do subtraction, it's the minus sign. So I do minus, and then I want it to subtract B17. So I say equals B6 minus B17. Now it turns out there's another way that I could do it. There's actually a function called, I believe it is equal subtract. Pretty sure it's equal subtract. There is a function that you could do, but I never ever use it because I mean, if I'm going to do subtraction, I just use minus. But I know that there is a function. Pretty sure it's called subtract, but I could be wrong. I'll look it up later. Anyway, B6 minus B17. I press enter, and we have a net of $1,800. Now I want to copy that same formula all the way across. So the lame way to do it would be to type it in again. But the cool way is to use our good old fill handle. And I think we want to do it all the way to total. Pretty sure we want to do it all the way to total. To N19. Yeah, I want to do it all the way to total. So what this means is that every month we're going to be in the red, except for January and September. But by the end of the year, we'll be in the black by $1,900 or almost $2,000. So what we really should have done is saved some money during the time that we had that we got our big bonuses and stuff, and then applied it so that we don't get charged late fees and overdraft fees every month. But we did that, so really our total is going to be way less than that because we're going to be charged overdraft fees from the bank for going over our overdraft on all that. So, but whatever. Or else we should spend less money on expenses. I mean, on miscellaneous and gas, I guess. But I don't know how we. That's the other thing. Gas is only $100. Really? $100 a month? Really? That's like. That's like what? Yeah. I like how rent is $400. I like how gas is $100. Car payments at $150. That's kind of okay. Although that's still a little bit low too. But $155 for car payments is somewhat reasonable. $2,000 for books and tuition. That's reasonable. But man, I want $400 rent.
Yeah.
Maybe they forgot a zero.
Yeah, I know. You might have forgot a zero. Might actually be $4,000. That's more like rent. But anyway, all right. So now we've got all of our data. So the problem with our data right at the moment is that this looks ugly. As beautiful as black font on white background is, and as lovely as Calibri font is, it really kind of isn't. And so what we're going to do when we come back from the break is we are going to make it awesome looking. But before we do that, are there any questions about anything at all that we've talked about so far today? Any questions? All right. Yes.
When you were doing these months, like January, February, March,
Uh-huh.
how far back do you have to click to make it go forward like that? March, January, February, March.
Yeah. So in for months and days of the week, it will start right away. It will Excel and Google Sheets assume that if you use the fill handle or the autofill handle, that you want to increment by 1. So if you say January, that's good enough for it to do February, March, April, May, June, July. If you do Tuesday, that's enough for it to do Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now, if you wanted it to be some other sequence, like you wanted it to be January, March, May, skipping a month, then you would have to do January and then March, and then it would recognize that pattern, and it would do that. For ordinal numbers like 1, 2, 3, you have to do at least 2 of them in order for it to figure out the pattern. If you're doing like odd numbers or even numbers, you need to do like 2 and then 4, and then it would figure out, okay, 6 will be the next one, and so on. Or if you want to go 1, 42, 80, whatever, 83, it'll do that. As long as you have established the pattern, it will do that pattern. Sometimes it'll think your pattern is that you want to repeat it. So if you do like 1, 3, 9, because you're adding 3 and then you're adding 3 upon 3 and then it would be adding 4 upon 4, and so on. Then it probably won't recognize that, and it will think you want to do 1, 3, 9, 1, 3, 9, 1, 3, 9. But in general, it will, if it's a relatively simple pattern, it will recognize that a relatively simple sequence. It will recognize that sequence. All right, so I want to save this, and let me see if I remember how we wanted to save this. I kind of think we had a name that we wanted. Did we want to save this? No, I guess we didn't say what we wanted to save it. So we want to save this as the personal budget worksheet. So we're just going to save this, and I am going to save this, of course, in my documents on my Mark Branham's Way Cool, Awesome Spiffy CA100D folder. And I am going to call this the Mark Branham, this is the personal budget. So you want to call it, your name, personal budget, or personal budget worksheet, something along those lines. And once we do that, then we're good for the moment. So let's take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back around 8:10, and we will make our spreadsheet look pretty.